Hi everybody, welcome to another Broken Meeple video, and today I'm contrasting two games here. Alley Cat Games released Dice Hospital a fair while ago, good few years back, and this has had many awards. I think I gave it a 7 out of 10 when I first played it, and it's essentially a light dice placement game where you are putting your dice into a hospital, the dice are the patients, and you use these rooms and doctors and nurses that you have in your hospital to adjust the pips on the dice, hopefully get them to beyond 6, discharge them and get victory points. Dice Theme Park is an upcoming Kickstarter from the same publisher, much in that same vein. I mean, this is essentially going to be like the start of a series at this rate. But with this one, yes, again, it is a light dice placement game, but there's a few little changes between this one and Dice Hospital, even though there are definitely some similarities in how they play. So it's a case that what I'm trying to do here is compare and contrast the two. I will give a basic summary as to which one of the two I prefer from playing, and bearing in mind this is a full copy of the retail game and this is merely a prototype with, like, you know, not even the correct components in it for most of it. And so obviously don't take this as a full-fledged final review, bit like the Eternal Palace Kickstarter video I did. You know, I will look into like giving it a proper review perhaps when it comes out on retail officially. But I will certainly at least let you know the differences and the similarities, and then you can make your own choice as to whether it's worth backing the Kickstarter when it eventually releases, I believe, late April time. So in Dice Theme Park, you have tiles much like your hospital in this one, and instead the dice represent guests. You will claim these dice from monorail tiles, and with these dice you'll place them at your park entrance, and then you will move those dice across your park in a kind of almost a sort of spatial awareness pick up and deliver thing. The best way I can describe it is think what Century Spice Road had. You know, what did Century Eastern Wonders do to Century Spice Road? It included that little pick up and deliver mechanic. Well, this is similar in a sense. You get the dice, they start at your entrance, but then you've got to move them to the rides that you want to get them on. Each ride is then activated in order to gain victory points based on the criteria of the ride. So it may be an even and an odd. I need an even greater than the number of the odd. I need a blue and a yellow. I need 3 blue. I need 2 yellows. I need a couple of reds that are, or greens, I forget the colours. You know, a couple of greens that are greater than 4. You know, they've got various simplistic criteria like that. And as you activate each ride, you'll get more income as well as points to like buy more rides and obviously win the game. Now, in terms of similarities, definitely both of these feel like a similar game. I mean, their turn sequences pretty much play out almost identical. In Dice Hospital, you had those ambulances that you grabbed the dice from. You took it in turns in initiative order to choose an ambulance with dice. You place them in your hospital, and then simultaneously all the players use their hospital in various ways in order to get the dice, manipulate the dice and get victory points. Well, here, pretty much the same thing, really. You have monorails instead of ambulances. In initiative order, you will take those dice. You will put them in your park. You will use your mascots, as they're called in this case, and your various rides in order to manipulate the dice and do cool stuff. So, for the most part, that's pretty similar. But here's probably the biggest difference here that I will say, and it's definitely an improvement, I feel. What happens each round is that you have 6 action cards, and you've got to play 2 of them in the round. Each one does something different, but each one also has an income bonus as well as an initiative order value on them. And what happens is you simultaneously play 2 of them, reveal them, and then not only do you get to trigger the effects of those ability cards, but the income boost obviously adds to your income for the round, but the initiative value determines what order you will take your turns in terms of choosing the dice and manipulating your rides. That can be a big deal. Dice Hospital didn't have action cards in it. You essentially had like a points going like turn order system in there, whereas here you now directly can influence turn order each round. You may not necessarily go first for a while because you're playing low initiative value cards, whereas you need better initiative to go first. And the twist with this is that you might think, oh, okay, it's just the same 6 cards. Nope. What happens at the end of the round is that the 2 cards that you played go to the player on your left. So it's, in a sense, a little bit of a drafting mechanic. I decide I'm going to use these 2 action cards. One's very good at manipulating the dice, one gets me like a discount on buying a ride this turn. Okay, I've done that. Great. Now I don't have those cards anymore. And the player who to my right, who's given me 2 more cards, might not necessarily give me those 2 cards because they played something different on their turn. So you could end up with duplicates, which is fine, but then maybe I really want to play that card I just played again and I don't have it because my player to the right doesn't want to give it to me. That is really cool. Gotta say, it's hands down the best aspect of this game. It adds a little bit of extra sort of level of decision making. I like the idea that the cards have got multiple uses. You know me when it comes to multi-use cards, I'm a big fan of that. But I like the idea that there's an extra level of player interaction with regards to giving the cards to the next player. That was one problem I had with Dice Hospital, was that the player interaction was kind of next to nil in this one. It was literally a case of, did you pick something before I did? The end. Other than that, the other players might as well have not been in the game. Here, though, they do play a big part, particularly if you're playing 3 or 4 players, where obviously like the cards that you've given to the player on your left might not even come back round to you for a while. That's assuming another player doesn't give it to you sooner. But on top of that, once you've got your initiative value sorted, you still choose dice in the same way as Dice Hospital. You've got monorails instead of ambulances. Big whoop. You know, that's the same deal. The dice are laid out, they're rolled, on they go, and obviously, depending on what you want for your rides, your initiative value is going to be important as to, like, I really want that ambulance, it's got the high dice on it. In that case, I'll play these initiative cards. Good, I went first, yoink, my dice. But then in Dice Hospital, you effectively did what you like with the dice. You know, they just went into your hospital rooms and they were used as you saw fit. Here, though, they now go on your park entrance and you have to move them using movement tokens in order to get them across your park. So it's all right in saying I've got this great ride that, you know, the ghost train that does a lot of cool stuff if I can get 3 red dice to it, but A, I need to get the red dice, and B, I need to get the red dice to that ride. The ride might be on the other end of the park and they don't move overly fast unless you've got a bunch of those movement tokens. So again, you get a little bit of a spatial awareness thing here. With regards to manipulating the dice, very much the same deal as Hospital. It's all about the pips. So, you know, here you wanted to avoid getting a 1 because it meant the patient died, and a 7 meant it was discharged. Here, it's mainly dependent on what the ride entails. Now, you don't necessarily need 6s all the time, or 5s and that. It's a case of that when the die reaches 1, the guest leaves the park. But it depends what the ride wants as to whether a low die actually might still be sufficient. It's not a lot of restrictions as to where you can actually put the tiles, but because the further you branch out, the further your dice have got to move to get to the ride, that plays a part. On top of this, because your dice effectively leave the tile and, you know, one can stick around but one has to go to a different tile, because obviously once you've gone on a ride you go and check out other rides, you kind of have to position your park rides in such a way that, well, hang on, if I take this red 6 over to here, right at the end of this ghost train, I use its ability, I get the points, and then I'll let it shift over to the roller coaster. It also could use an odd die there. Well, now it's a 5, so next round I'm going to or even in the same round, because you activate them one at a time effectively, you can go, right, well now that's there, I can activate this ride, and that 5 can be used on this roller coaster. So you're kind of trying to, whereas this one you were trying to chain a bunch of dice to leave your hospital at the same time, here you're almost trying to chain subsequent ride activations. But that's kind of a tactic of the game, really, and it, you know, makes enough thematic sense compared to that rule, where it just adds that nice bit of extra tactical complexity and depth that can reward players who are very good at planning ahead. You know, anybody who has managed to set up their rides in such a way and got the dice where they can go, right, as soon as I get that die over to there, I'm going to chain all these 4 rides together and it's going to get me a lot of points and it's going to be really cool. And as I say, it feels very rewarding to do that. I like the idea that the theme is represented a bit better with the dice here. Here, they were patients and they ticked down and that was okay. Here, I like the concept that the dice are going to the rides and then they go on the ride and then they can either like go on the ride again at a later time or they decide to leave the park. You know, their pips tick down because they're reducing their enjoyment of the game. Pretty cool in a thematic sense. I even like the way that it references that when the dice get to the tile, if they're not going on the ride, they are essentially queuing. So, which is what happens. You queue to get on the ride, you eventually get on it, your enjoyment factor comes down a little bit because you've gone on the ride, you've had a good time, but then you've gone on the ride. You know, what else is there to do around the park? And by the time you've done a few rides, you're like, you know what, I'm kind of done, let's go home. Very good theme representation here. Better than Dice Hospital, I think. And back to another difference, a big difference, and it really is one of those things that nearly killed this game for me, is the scoring. The scoring system in here makes a lot better sense. Yeah, I mean, the criteria for each thing is abstract. You know, do I need an even and an odd, 3 blue, 2 green, whatever. I mean, that doesn't really have any thematic ties, but each tile scores individually. You activate them and then they have their own criteria for scoring. It doesn't matter whether you do 1 ride at a time or 4 rides at a time, the scoring is based on the tile itself. I really didn't like in Hospital that rule where you got more points for discharging patients all at the same time. It made no thematic sense, and if it does make thematic sense, I don't want to be treated at any hospital that has that kind of practice.
And get the machine that goes bing!
But it did irk me because I felt that it just meant that everybody played relatively the same way, because everybody is just trying to get a bunch of dice to discharge all at once, and if you don't manage to do that in the game, then chances are you're not really going to win. Here though, it's all about the selection of rides and the manipulation of the dice, not only in terms of the abilities, but also just moving around your park in the first place. Now in Dice Hospital, you had nurses and doctors, surgeons and various administrators that you could get for special abilities, and you got them each round. Well, here you effectively have mascots, and they're essentially the same thing, really. The mascots are meeples that go on your park rides, and you have the option of including the variant for Meeple tricks. The basic rule is pretty standard, but honestly, just play with the Meeple tricks. It's a lot more fun that way. And essentially, you've got the basic rule for what a Meeple does in terms of manipulating dice, because after all, the mascot is going around the theme park entertaining people. But the Meeple trick is kind of like an upgraded version that only you have. So I've got one that does water fights, which, you know, is really good if I can get it in the same situation as a bunch of blue dice. Somebody else might have a completely different card for different dice for a different situation. Cool. Some asymmetrical play there, which I like. In terms of player powers, you know, you can start off with player powers in this game as another variant. Again, use it every time. I honestly don't know why I wouldn't use them. They're not that complicated, and they help guide you in terms of a kind of like a strategy of how you should play, like, you know, play to your power strengths. I'd say that's good for new players. Now, I can't really talk about components because obviously this is a retail edition. This is a pre-prototype Kickstarter copy, whatever you want to call it. But artwork in here was pretty standard, so I can't imagine it would change drastically. And much like Hospital, it's bright, it's colourful, it's cartoony, looks the part. You'll get into the setting of the theme park nicely. Same with the Hospital. In fact, I dare say you'll probably get more into the theme of this one because the rides are a bit more interesting to look at than just simply, you know, the what do you call them, the major incident ward or something, and the diagnostic ward or something. It's like, whoopee, it's basically just a room with a slightly different equipment layout, whereas here, a ghost train is a bit different to a Ferris wheel, which is a bit different to a monorail, which is a bit different to a roller coaster. So there's certainly a lot more variety in what to actually look at on here. So to summarise with these games, there's essentially 3 major differences between them. For the most part, they're very similar. They're light dice placement games, same styling, probably similar style of components, although I can't necessarily compare on this one until we see the Kickstarter. But, you know, if you like most of this game, you should like most of this game. But here's 3 key differences to pull away from this video. Firstly, the spatial awareness. So moving your dice around the tiles, getting them to the specific rides before they activate. That is a key difference and certainly ups the complexity level, because obviously you've got to forward plan where you're going to send these dice and at what point, compared to Dice Hospital where you essentially just get the dice, shove them in your hospital and then work out what you can do with the rooms you've got. Secondly, the action cards. Easily my favourite aspect of this new version, and you know, having the choice of 6 different action cards with multi-uses, which is always good, but then the drafting element of passing the 2 cards to the player on your left and not necessarily getting the cards you want from the player on your right. Being able to sort of think, well, hang on, I reckon that you're gonna focus more on dice manipulation this turn and really high income, so because you're a bit short on money. So I could play these 2 cards this round, knowing that you're likely to pass me a high income card. You know, decisions like that really do elevate this game in terms of enjoyment. And then thirdly, the scoring system. The idea that the rides here are all like individually geared. Yes, you can chain them together in the sense of one die can leave one ride, go to another, go to another, go to another. but the rides score individually and it makes sense thematically how it works. I didn't like the way that you scored in this with loads of patients being discharged at the same time. It is one of my big bugbears with this game. Like one of the things I would change in this game, like the big thing I would change is that scoring. But here though, makes more sense and works a lot better. So overall, I'd say if any of that sounds particularly good to you, then check out the Kickstarter when it launches. If you want my very basic early impressions of which one I prefer, I'm actually quite excited for this Dice theme park actually. This Dice Hospital I've yet to try with the expansion and see if that improves the game for me, but as I say, that scoring system and the lack of interaction and even the game length in this one can go quite long if you're not careful, and game length in here is fairly similar as well. I know one quotes 45 to 90 and the other one quotes 75 to 90. Honestly, it's pretty much 75 to 90 whichever one of these you pick. But you know, Dice Hospital is still a good game and I do recommend it, but I reckon I would pick Theme Park over the two of them actually, and I'm not just saying that because it's a Kickstarter video. I genuinely think that that spatial awareness plus the action cards and the change to the scoring, those three key differences are the differences that I think this game needed. You know, I can take or leave both themes. I like theme parks more than I like hospitals, I suppose that goes without saying really, but you know, I reckon this one's going to be pretty solid, so I'll be interested to see how the Kickstarter for this rolls out, and if any of that sounds up your alley, then by all means give this game a look. So that's it from me on this video. I'll see you on the next one, and take care, and remember, whichever one you pick, whether you prefer to visit a theme park or a hospital, I think the jury's out on that one, who knows, it's still only a game. Take care, and I'll see you next time.